So what we're looking at here is the all-new invisible subwoofer called the IS10-2W. So it's an extension of the product line for the Invisible series. It features two 10-inch woofers behind a narrow but tall panel, and you can see it also has a built-in enclosure. So taking that feedback about the IS15W, great as a subwoofer solution, but difficult to integrate sometimes. So what we've done is change the form factor up, and now you have an invisible subwoofer that fits into a standard 16-inch on-center 2x4 stud bay. So I think this is really a big deal. I'm been, continue to be excited about seeing how a true invisible subwoofer can be integrated and enable different types of systems with the IS15W. For the first time, we can do actual, let's say, surround sound or even theater projects with an Invisible series speaker with a subwoofer. But again, difficult to integrate a 15W unless you're really early in on the planning phase, and if you have the ability to custom frame for it. So that's what's really great about the IS10-2W is all the greatness that exists with an invisible subwoofer now fits into a stud bay without needing modification of that. So that's really great. I think it's really important to call out some of the similarities and differences between this and the 15W. And the great news is there's way more similarities than there are differences. So I already mentioned the installation is a huge improvement over the 15W, but the performance is actually very similar. And in fact, the sensitivity is only different by about a decibel. And the low frequency extension is really only different by about 3 hertz or so. So the IS15W is still technically on paper slightly better performing subwoofer, but you would be hard pressed to hear the differences between these two if you put them side by side, in all honesty here. So the performance is right up there with that 15W, very, very, very close. And like that product, it's also an in-wall only. So this is really important. When you have a big panel like this, and if you were to try to put it into a ceiling, the weight of that panel would sag and cause, a bowing kind of effect, which sort of defeats the purpose of having an invisible speaker. So, again, with a panel this size, it really needs to go in a wall so that you can blend it in and make it perfectly seamless with your wall finishes. So again, in wall only. And that's the same as the 15W. Also, like the 15W, it has that integrated enclosure built in, and it also requires the use of a Sonance DSP amp. Whereas before we said with the 15W, you've got to use it with the DSP 2750. What we're saying is, yes, you can use this sub with the DSP 2750. That's probably the ideal amp to use it with. However, you can power it with a single channel of a DSP 2150 or a single channel of a DSP 8130. And the only downside to that is you'll lose a little bit of max output if you do that, just because those two amps don't have quite the power of a 2750. And so to put that into hard mathematical terms, powering this subwoofer with a 2150, you'll have about 2 dB less max output. If you power it with one channel of an 8130, you'll have about 3 dB less output. But still, even with an 8130, we've been doing this in the office for a couple months now. Powered off of an 8130 sounds great, and for our purposes, it achieves plenty of SPL level. In fact, the max SPL that you'll get out of this is still above about 110 dB. So we're still talking about really high SPLs, even when driven by a single channel of an 8130. So that's really exciting. But yeah, you got to use our DSP amps. We have a special DSP curve that you need to apply in order to get the full bass response out of the speaker, and that's available. You can download that on my Sonance. You can download it on our website. You can also access it from the Sonamp interface on our amplifiers as well.